Hi everyone, my name is Eduardo Diniz Figueiredo. I'm from Universidade Federal do Paraná, and today I'm recording a presentation entitled Identities and Emotions in Language Teacher Education, a research project. I want to start by thanking Professor Ana Sevilla Pavon for the invitation and saying that I hope the presentation is interesting for at least some of you. Before starting to talk about the project itself, just to position myself, say where I'm speaking from, my locus of enunciation. I'm in Brazil, as I said. Here in Brazil, I'm usually seen as a person of privilege for being a man, a white cisgender man. However, when I travel to other places, I'm usually racialized in different ways. And the reason I think this is important to say is because I experience privilege or lack of privilege in different ways depending on where I'm from. Like I said, I'm here in Brazil. I'm in the south of Brazil, which also puts me in a position of privilege in terms of academic research, because my institution is usually seen also as an institution of privilege. However, in other parts of the world, particularly in the global north, this usually changes, right? Because I'm in a global south university, this position of privilege is lost, right? I am working at a large institution, an institution that, like I said, is very well respected in Brazil. It's well known in other places as well. But like I said, there are issues with being a Global South university when we have conversations with a Global North. From an onto-epistemic perspective, I am somebody who sees myself as a Global South scholar with many dialogues and conversations with scholars in the Global North and Global South, and trying to make these conversations as constructive as possible so that we can come from different epistemological places and collaborate with one another. I think it's important to say all of that because I am presenting here to an audience that doesn't know me, and I think that by knowing these factors, you will see where my presentation is coming from and where I'm coming from, and why some of these issues might be important for you, the ones that I'm discussing here. To contextualize the research project a little bit, we have seen a growing interest for studying emotions in teaching contexts in applied linguistics. I know that Professor Ana Sevilla Pavon is one of the people in Spain who has demonstrated such interest and who has been engaged with it from a research perspective. We have also seen a need for understanding the relation between affect and other social constructs, and in my case, particularly identity seems relevant. And we have seen an increasing discomfort of teacher educators and university professors in general regarding workload and quality of life. And I share this discomfort, and this is one of the main factors that have led me to start this research project. And in particular, I'm citing here a book by Berg and Sieber, and I'm sorry that the reference there came out a little wrong, but it's Berg and Sieber 2016, which has become a very well-known reference, even outside of academia, which is called the slow professor, which is going against this idea of fast science to which we are submitted in today's world. However, in spite of this interest, I think that studies that pay specific attention to the emotions of teacher educators themselves, right, as well as to their identity constructions are more scarce, right? And what do I mean by that? We see a lot of studies on emotions looking at students, looking at professors in general, but not looking at professors who are teacher educators, who are working in teacher education programs. And that's where the research project starts from. So the research project is entitled Identities and Emotions in Language Teacher Education. Like I said previously, right? It was first conceived in 2019 and it was supposed to run for 5 years until this year, 2024, but it was then renewed this year, in fact, just last week, for 5 more years until 2029 by my university. And the goal is to understand how emotional and identity factors are conceptualized and addressed in the university context, particularly in my university context, and particularly in language teacher education, which is the program where I work. And I said my university context, let me correct myself, my and colleagues' university context, because as you will see, this is part of a group endeavor. So we have 5 professors from 4 institutions involved, 3 postgraduate and 2 undergraduate students involved, and so far we have had 4 major publications and 3 current studies are being developed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those 4 major publications to say, things that we have done and that we have tried to do, and, findings that we have had so far and other things that might be of your interest. We have used a number of different methods, right? We have used questionnaires to gather such data, right? Both qualitative and quantitative oriented questionnaires, right? Generating qualitative and quantitative data. We have also used interviews and also autoethnographic accounts, right? Collaborative autoethnographic accounts to discuss the issues that pertain to our particular university context, as I mentioned. So like I said, I'm going to talk about 4 studies here, the 4 studies that have been recently published. This one is one of the ones that's published in English. It's entitled Emotions, Well-Being, and Work Routine of Language Teacher Educators in 2 Brazilian Public Universities. This is a study that took quite a while to develop because it was developed during the pandemic, right? And in this study, we interviewed 13 participants after 18 participants having replied to a questionnaire, an initial questionnaire. We interviewed 13 of them who accepted to be part of the interview in 2 different universities here in Brazil. And the 2 universities were my own, from the Universidade Federal do Paraná, as I said, and my colleagues, Diniz Klug's university, which is Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. Diniz Klug is a professor there, right? We also had the participation of Helena Sturme, who is a postgraduate student at Universidade Federal de Viçosa, and who was my undergraduate teaching assistant when she was a student at my own university, right? Now, in this particular study, we wanted to discuss, issues related to emotions, to the work routine, to the workload, to the well-being of professors during the pandemic, but also not only during the pandemic, right? So here we discuss issues that are not necessarily pertaining to the pandemic itself, right? And we see 3 different results, 3 different themes that are interesting for us, right? One is the way in which these professors discuss the university space in their discourses, right? And what they say about how the university is imagined as this dream space to work at, how this university is constructed discursively in what is said about it, right? Once you enter the university to work with, but also, and perhaps more importantly, what is often said, what is often left unsaid in discourses about working at a university, and it's usually in this unsaid that you have, most of the workload and of the things that are disruptive in professors' work routines, right? We also see participants defining their identities based on the notion of time and how much time they are devoted to the things that they want to do, right? So they feel as better professors or worse professors, researchers, and also, husbands, wives, parents, right? So they're talking about their personal lives too, depending on the time they are able to allocate to each one of these activities, right? And what's really interesting is that they talk about the university space with pleasure, but also with a lot of guilt, right? And this guilt is usually associated with a sense of agency that they do acknowledge that they have, right? So they can say no to things, but that agency of saying no or of disagreeing with someone often comes with an inherent guilt because they want to contribute to that space as much as possible. Another study from the same research project, this time focusing on the pandemic itself. Like I said previously, our focus was, on work routine and well-being and emotions during the pandemic, but also, not necessarily during the pandemic, right? So we decided to isolate this notion of the pandemic to one study alone, right? And this one was developed with Professor Kyria Finardi, who I know you have met, right? Because she has done a lot of research on the pandemic, so she helped us with the investigation here, right? Making sense of our data. And here we discuss similar issues to the ones we discussed in the previous study, but in the context of the pandemic more specifically. A third study, which was also developed with Professor Kyria Finardi from Universidade Federal do Espírito Santo, and with a colleague of hers, Lívia Fortes, also from Universidade Federal do Espírito Santo, was more autoethnographic in nature, right? And here we were looking at our own emotions during the development of a practicum class that was conducted by Kyria and in which Lívia and myself were invited to participate, right? And we were looking at how this particular class was developed, the difficulties we had, the challenges we had in our emotions during the process, right? Now, what's interesting about this study is that we had a very peculiar context because the pandemic had just ended and there were a lot of issues at schools with being able to let students enter their classrooms, state schools and municipal schools in the city of Vitória, letting students into their classes, into their classrooms to do their practicum. And there were issues also with fear of violence because there had been violent episodes in the state, right? And other notions that were very complicated in that practicum class. And we decided to explore our own emotions in relation to that class. Now, what's particularly interesting about this study too is that in this study, we discuss emotions from a decolonial perspective, right? In the other studies I showed you, we don't put too much focus on this decolonial aspect of the study of emotions, right? And we feel this is very important because decolonial studies have emphasized how modern science and mainstream science has often disregarded the body and disregarded emotions from a lot of the discussions they have, particularly on cognition, right? But here we are making sense of how emotions are central to the development of a practicum course and to our work as teacher educators and also to the work of our students in that teacher education class. Finally, one study here that was developed with a colleague of yours, right, a former advisee of Professor Ana Sevilla Pavon, Jill Waterman, and also with Professor Kyria Finardi and with myself. And this particular study was actually a comparative study of results obtained by Jill there in Valencia and results that I obtained with Kyria here in a study here in Brazil. And I think what's really interesting here is because here is an example of a global north, global south collaboration, right? Where we are comparing results of two different studies, constructing dialogue together and trying to explore what we have in common so that we can move along in collaborative ways, right? And I invite you all to read this study as well as the other three studies that I have mentioned here. And also the three future studies that we are developing and hopefully the other ones that are still yet to come. With this, I want to say thank you very much. Muito obrigado. If you have any interest in any of my research or, if you just want to talk or anything, here's my email address, right? And I hope we get the chance to speak soon, okay? Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Muito obrigado and hasta luego.